Hey, this is my first UFC preview video for UFC 114. I decided instead of writing an article this week, I would put together a video with my predictions and pretty pictures and fun stuff to look at. So here we go. I'm going to be previewing the four main fights on the card in order, starting with the welterweight battle between Diego Sanchez and John Hathaway. So, John Hathaway is an undefeated fighter from the UK who kind of came up in the era fighting a lot of UK fighters before they had a lot of great gyms. No one really knows how great he is because he hasn't really been tested. Meanwhile, Diego, everyone knows from The Ultimate Fighter and from his, recent fight with BJ Penn where he got his ass kicked for 5 rounds. But that was at 155 at lightweight. Now we're stepping up to a 170 welterweight fight where Diego was never really that successful, and that's why he moved down. So this should be an interesting fight. Diego's a wrestler, whereas Hathaway, from the UK is more of a striker. They don't really do too much wrestling over there. So I think Diego's wrestling is probably going to be too much for Hathaway, as we've seen from, the recent fights with Paul Daly and Koscheck, and before that, Bisping and Henderson. There wasn't much wrestling in that. So I think my official prediction for Diego Sanchez versus John Hathaway is Sanchez by TKO in the second round. Next fight. This fight, I think, is the least interesting of the 4 main fights just because it's a fill-in fight. Little Nog, Antonio Rogerio. The R is pronounced as an H for those who don't know. I only really learned that like 2 weeks ago, so don't feel bad. Versus Jason Britz. What's interesting about these two is that they have pretty similar records. They're both, I think, Little Nog is 18-3, while Jason Britz is 18-2-1. However, Little Nog has been involved in some of the most well-known fights in organizations like Pride, etc. His showdown with Shogun is one of the most famous fights in Pride history. He's also one of only 3 people to to submit Dan Henderson, which, Dan Henderson's a pretty tough dude. So Little Nog has fought some real quality fighters, and he looked great in his last fight with Lewis Kane. He also was a member of the Brazilian national boxing team and won a gold medal at the World Championships or something like that. So his boxing is really good. His jiu-jitsu is world class. And Jason Britz has a full-time job as a firefighter. So that kind of gives you an idea of where I'm leaning in this fight. I think despite the similar records, Little Nog is a much better class of fighter than Jason Britz. No disrespect to Jason Britz, but I think Little Nog is going to get a first-round knockout, and I think it'll be pretty easy. I think there's a lot of talk about whether or not Little Nog is actually the 3rd best fighter in the 205 division, which, after the way he dismantled Kane and the list of guys he's fought, including, winning striking battles against unadmittedly, pre-steroids, Alistair Overeem, Little Nog definitely is in the picture in that stacked 205 division, which, the main card will determine the number 1 contender this UFC 114. So my official prediction, Little Nog, Antonio Rogerio Nogueira by knockout in the first round. Well, which brings us to our next fight, which is Bisping versus Miller. So both of these guys, to me, are not quite contenders at middleweight. I think Bisping, had that awful performance against Dan Henderson after talking so much shit about how he was going to be the first guy to knock out Dan Henderson and how this, that, or the other was going to happen. And what happened was he got knocked out in something like 30 seconds and knocked unconscious, which was awesome because I like Hendo. But I think Bisping is very overrated. He really hasn't won that many fights in impressive fashion. He hasn't really beaten anybody good. He had a really, I mean, I guess it was an okay showing against Vanderlei Silva a few months ago, but really Vanderlei didn't look very good in that performance, and Bisping lost a decision that was close, but he didn't really do much to win the fight, and he almost got guillotined pretty badly. Dan Miller, on the other hand, has kind of also fought the better guys in the middleweight division and lost to them. He, lost a 3-round fight to Chael Sonnen, where Sonnen just took him down and pounded him at will. He lost a decision to Damian Maia, and I mean those guys aren't really world beaters. I mean, we saw what Anderson Silva did to Damian Maia. Now, granted, Damian Maia's jiu-jitsu is really good, but still, there's a lot of holes in Damian Maia's game and Chael Sonnen's game. So I think this fight, as always, Dan Miller, a little more of a wrestler, a little better at jiu-jitsu, whereas Bisping doesn't really have that great of a ground game. Nor is he really that great of a striker. Bisping really just isn't that good. So I'm going to go with the upset here, and I'm going to pick Dan Miller by a close decision. I think this is going to be a pretty boring fight. I'm not really, of all the 4 fights I'm previewing, this is the one I'm least excited about, because I really just think it's going to be kind of, I don't think Miller has the strength or power to knock or TKO Bisping, and I don't think Bisping has the ground skills to be able to keep it standing, nor do I think he has the ability to knock out Dan Miller either. So I think we're looking at a boring decision fight that really shouldn't affect the middleweight division too much as to what happens and who gets the next shot at Anderson Silva, because Anderson Silva would destroy both of these guys really easily. Not that there's very many guys in the middleweight division that he wouldn't destroy, but still. Now, let's cut to the main event, the fight that I have been looking forward to for a really, really, really long time. Rampage Jackson versus Rashad Evans. These two hate each other. Rashad is a former national champion wrestler. He fought in January, where he beat a dangerous fighter in a boring kind of drag-down match. Rampage, on the other hand, hasn't fought in something like 14 months. On paper, Rampage has a lot more experience. Rampage has almost twice as many fights as Rashad. Rashad only has the one loss to Machida in his professional record, but he hasn't really fought the caliber of guys that Rampage has fought. Again, going back to Pride and those kind of days, Rampage has really fought the best of the best consistently in all the promotions he's been in, and Rampage naturally is a really, really talented fighter. He's also a little bit bigger, which I think will make a big difference. I think there's a couple big height advantages on this one. Like Diego is like 4 inches, 5 inches shorter than John Hathaway, and Little Nog's like 3 inches bigger than Jason Britz. But I think Rampage is like 2 inches taller than Rashad, and he just seems bigger. He seems like a bulkier guy. He seems stronger. I have been watching the primetime Rampage versus Rashad specials, and it does seem like Rashad's training harder. But I think what happens, both of these guys have a background in wrestling. I think we're going to see a stand-up fight, and I think that Rampage is going to get the knockout. I think Rashad is going to get knocked out. I just don't think his skills on the feet are nearly anywhere near Rampage's striking, and I don't think he's going to be able to take Rampage down or really even try to. I think this is going to be two guys who don't like each other, swinging for the fences and trying to get a knockout as quick as possible. And I think Rampage will knock Rashad out, and then I think he'll howl like a wolf and give one of the best press conferences in UFC history. So I'm super excited. I'll be tuned in on Saturday, and I hope everyone enjoyed this video. Leave me some feedback, leave me comments, and let me know if you want me to do more of these in the future. Talk to you later.